So in this class I'm going to look at deriving the formula for the circumference of a circle, and in the next class we'll derive the formula for an area of a circle. So one question, that is often misunderstood is this: what is pi? What is pi? People often have a number in their head, a particular number. That number is not actually accurate, although it's close. Lots of people say pi is 3.14. Pi is close to being 3.14, but it's not exactly 3.14. In fact, it's a little bigger than 3.14. So what is it? Well, to figure out what it is, one thing we have to think about is this idea of the circumference of a circle. Circumference of a circle is just the perimeter of a circle. It's the distance around the outside. Okay, so it's the length of this blue curved line here is the circumference of this circle, however long that line is. If I was to snip it and straighten it and measure it, I would know the circumference of the circle. So one thing that's quite challenging actually is to measure that. If you were trying to measure that, we don't really have good accurate tools to measure this circumference. And going back thousands of years, this was something that mathematicians were interested in. How could we measure the length of this curved line around the outside? So they studied circles. We do know that we can measure the length of straight lines pretty straightforward. We have various instruments for doing that. So like a ruler, for example, will measure the length of a straight line, but it won't measure the length of a circle. Try to use a ruler to measure the length of a circle. Pretty difficult. In fact, pretty much impossible. You could use your ruler to kind of get, I suppose, an approximation. However, straight lines are pretty straightforward. We can measure straight lines using instruments. And this is a little straight line segment, and I put it exactly in the middle of the circle here. That line in the circle there, that's called the diameter of the circle. And going back thousands of years, mathematicians noticed that there was a relationship in all circles between the diameter and the circumference of the circle. Just trying to get this to sit just right in the middle there. Okay, so they noticed that no matter how big or how small a circle was, that the circumference of the circle was always about 3 times the size of the diameter. Okay, approximately 3. And what they did was they looked at various circles and they said no matter how big or small the circle is, that relationship doesn't change. The circumference is always about 3 times the size of the diameter. Okay, in fact it's a little more than 3 diameters in length. Okay, so if I was to snip this circle and measure it out in a straight line, that would be a little bit more than 3 of these diameters in length. And then they started to try to get more and more accurate with that number. Instead of saying about 3, they were able to say, well, actually it's about 3.1. And then they were able to say, actually it's about 3.14. And they had a name for this number, which they just called pi. So pi is defined as being the ratio of the circumference of a circle to its diameter. So in every circle, if I divide the circumference by the diameter, I get the number pi, and that's a constant. And we have calculators which give us pi correct to say 8 or 9 decimal places. Pi has been calculated correct to billions of decimal places. There's people who can recite pi correct to 20,000 decimal places. But the big thing to remember about pi is that it's just the circumference of a circle divided by its diameter. And we use it to help us solve problems around circles. Notice if I put that into one of our triangular relationships we talk about all the time. Circumference divided by diameter gives me pi. So circumference will equal to pi times the diameter. I could write that as pi equals to circumference divided by the diameter, or the circumference divided by pi is equal to the diameter of the circle. Okay, remember the diameter is a line segment that passes through the center of the circle and touches the circle on both sides. And there are infinitely many diameters in a circle. They're all the same length. And there are 2 radii. So the circumference of a circle is pi multiplied by the diameter. That's essentially the definition of pi. Notice every diameter is made up of 2 smaller line segments called radii. So every diameter is 2 radii in length. So you'll often see circumference as pi times the diameter, which is 2 radii. So the circumference can be written as 2 pi times r. Okay, this is in your formula and tables booklets, I think on page 8 or 9. This formula. I would recommend that you remember a couple of things. First of all, the circumference is equal to 2 pi r, but I would also encourage you to remember the circumference is equal to, well, 2 radii are just a diameter. So pi times the diameter. Either of these two, remember them. And, you know, think about this. I always like to think about these little triangular relationships. They crop up all over the place in mathematics. So we say the circumference and the diameter are directly proportional. If I doubled the diameter, I would double the circumference. Okay, so that's what pi is, and it's central to everything that we're going to be talking about in this section. So if I look at an example here, I suppose I want to find the circumference of this circle. I'm given the diameter is 10. Well, remember, the circumference is pi times the diameter. So circumference equals pi times d. The diameter here is given, so the circumference is going to be pi times 10 centimeters, which is just going to be 10 pi centimeters. Okay, and that's an approximation. That's an exact value, I should say. That's exactly precise. If you wanted to figure out, you know, what that is, you could use your calculator. You have a pi function in your calculator, see if you can find it. It's the shift function on my calculator of the times 10 to the power of x button. So I can type in 10 pi equals, my calculator just says 10 pi unless I change it to a decimal. That's approximately equal to 31.4159264 centimeters. Notice I'm saying approximately equal because it's not exact. That's rounded off to a certain number of decimal places. Pi has infinitely many decimals. Those decimals never stop. We've rounded off here with our calculator. Okay, so that's an approximate value. If you were asked to round that to the nearest whole number, you would say the circumference is approximately 31 centimeters. If you were asked to round it to the first decimal place, you would say the circumference is approximately 31.4 centimeters. And we have the tools to round it off to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Up to 8 decimal places we can round it off to. Anything beyond that, we don't really have the tools. Okay, look at another example here. I'm given the radius is 4 meters. Again, I'm going to use it. The formula that involves radius, this is in your formula and tables booklets, page 8 or 9. It says the circumference equal to 2 pi times the radius. So that's just 2 pi times 4 meters, which will be 8 pi meters. Again, that's the exact answer. If I want to find out an approximation for that, I just plug it into my calculator. 8 pi equals, change it to a decimal, 25.1327413 meters circumference. That's an approximation. The exact answer is there. Notice that's an equal sign. This is an approximately equal sign. Okay, depending on the context of the question, they might say round it off, corrected 3 decimal places. Corrected 3 decimal places, I would say pi is approximately equal to 25.133. Why 3? Because 27 is closer to 30 than it is to 20. And I would have to include my units. If I leave out units in an exam, I lose marks generally. Look at one more example here. I'm given the circumference I'm trying to find the radius. Well, we know that the circumference is 2 pi times the radius. Circumference equals 2 pi times the radius. So 36 pi, plugging in on the left for circumference, is going to equal to 2 pi multiplied by whatever the radius is. I'm going to use the division property of equations, which says if both sides of an equation are divided by the same quantity, then the two sides will remain equal. Here I'm dividing both sides by 2 pi. On the right hand side, that's going to lead to cancellation. I'm going to get or. On the left hand side, the pi's will cancel. 36 divided by 2 is 18. So therefore or is equal to 18. What are my units? Well, circumference measured in centimeters, so radius is measured in centimeters. So the radius is 18 centimeters. So that's the formula for the circumference of the area of a circle, or for the circumference of a circle. It is based on the definition of pi. Okay, we're in section 9.2. So practice.